I'd also like to share a few words with you this evening. First, we want to thank you all for coming, and I want to thank especially Dharmarajan and Dharmini for the wonderful work they've been doing here to bring Master's teachings. And they've been dear friends of ours for a number of years, and we know the quality of these two fine people, and we're so happy they can be here in Chennai with all of you to help share Swami's vision and share Master's teachings. In talking about Swamiji's, the early years, I came in 1969 when the community was just starting. I thought it might be helpful to compare some experiences we had with Swami to our own spiritual quest. What can we learn from Swamiji's life that will help us spiritually? Because for most of us, we won't have a great mission in life the way he did. We won't be starting a worldwide effort of spreading higher teachings. But each one of us has a great work to do, and that is to find God. And if we, in a sense, that is the most important thing that any soul can do in this world. And the rest of it is just fulfilling our karma. And Swami said that as much. He said all the things that, he once at a lecture, he said, please understand, you all thank me for everything I'm teaching you, but Swamiji said, I need you just as much as you need me, because I need to fulfill my karma. If I didn't have attentive students and receptive people coming, I couldn't fulfill what my guru asked me to do. So he saw even everything he did as just fulfilling the edict, the direction that our Guruji gave him. But all of it was done with great love and with the underlying purpose both to find God and to help other people to find God. But if we look at our own spiritual search, what lessons can we draw from Swamiji's life? Well, the first one, as Jyotish was speaking of, in the early years, I never remembered Swami doing any activity, undertaking any project that did not have at its core the sole purpose of building Ananda ashrams. And so if he would even have a little social time, have a little picnic or a gathering, he would invite people and he would use that time to talk about God and Guru. And so the focus of his mind was always on seeking God and doing what his Guru asked him. There's Master's Yoganandaji's beautiful poem, God, God, God. When he said, Master wrote this beautiful poem, you can read it in whispers from eternity, but he said, when eating, drinking, serving, meditating, divinely loving, the spotlight of my mind ever keeps turning on thee, and in the battle din of activity, my silent war cry will be, God, God, God. And so you could feel that with Swamiji. Behind everything he did, there was the unified purpose of seeking God and serving his Guru. And everything he did had that as the ulterior motive. It was as though he didn't waste a moment. He knew life was short. He didn't waste a moment in trivial pursuits, but everything was focused on that goal. And so for each of us in our spiritual life, when we undertake the path of Kriya Yoga, brought to our time by Babaji, we'll be talking more in our discourse on Saturday about this great dispensation from Babaji and our masters of Kriya Yoga. But always there was the underlying purpose in everything Swamiji did, and we need to see that too. It's not that we give up our job, abandoned our family, But somewhere in the back of our mind, that silent war cry, calling God, God, God. For me, I've drawn that lesson in life. Make that your priority. Your karma may pull you in this direction or that direction, but always keep your goal focused. If you have to move to a different city for your job, whatever it may be, if changes happen in your life, still keep that focus on your own spiritual practices, on your sadhana, on your devotion, on your service. We can do this. It's not that we neglect other things, but we always remember what is important in my life. Because if I give that up, if I give up my search for God, if I let other things take precedent, I will never find what I'm looking for. Yoganandaji said something very encouraging. He said, God does not mind our faults. He minds our indifference. So that's something to think about, that we all make mistakes. We all think, oh, well, I'm not a good devotee. I didn't meditate as long as I should. But as long as the spotlight of your mind ever keeps turning on God from within, then we're headed in the right track. But when we think, oh, it's not so important, I can go and waste time, and I can do useless activities, and then we become indifferent, and then God weeps. He weeps because he sees that our souls are moving away from what will bring us real happiness. And so with Swamiji, that example of that unified purpose underlying every activity. And if we can, in every moment of our life, if we can say, okay, now I have to go to work, but I will be thinking of God as I drive. I will have a picture or a murti on my car, and I will be thinking of God. And when I'm at work, I will be thinking in the background, how can I do this work as a service to God, whatever it might be. And to try to have that unity of purpose. It's only it's such a blessing to be able to simplify our life, cut out as Yoganandaji said, the unnecessary necessities, and just say, everything has to lead to the focal point of my search for God. So another aspect of Swamiji's life which we can apply to our sadhana is how to deal with obstacles. Because in building Ananda, Swami had many, many thwarting incidents that happened. Some of you may know in 1975, which was 6 years into the building of the Ananda ashram, we had a forest fire. The community is in the foothills of the mountains, a very wooded area, and in the summer it gets very hot and dry. And if a fire starts, it's very difficult to put it out. And so a fire came, and it burnt the community to the ground. Now, Swami had been working and teaching, and as Jyotish described, going all over California and writing books and trying to sell them with the purpose of building this ashram. In several hours, it was all gone. Nothing left but ashes. And yet, how did he respond? Did he get mad at God? Did he say, it's not supposed to happen, I'm walking away? He approached it in 3 ways. And this is very important too to our meditation, because we'll have periods in our spiritual life where thwarting cross currents come in and we can't meditate and our hearts feel dry, they don't feel devotion in them. So the first thing Swami, his first response after the fire was great calmness. He called a meeting of all of us, and we were shaken. We had lost our homes, our belongings, our places of work, the gardens, everything was gone. And he just very calmly had a meeting. And I listened to a recording a few years ago of this meeting, which took place in 1975. And Swami was so calm and reassuring. And he just said, all right, where can we live? How can we get started again? And because of his great calmness and centeredness, all of us went forward with great confidence. We didn't think, oh, it's over now. And so when you face obstacles in your life and in your spiritual life, approach them calmly. Don't react. Don't get all emotional. This is terrible. This is a disaster. Just calmly ask the question, what can I do about it? And then find some solutions through the grace of God and intuition and move forward. The next thing Swamiji did, and we can apply this in our spiritual life, is he, instead of contracting and saying, oh, we have to regroup and let's, kind of have your confidence discouraged, he said, this is the time to start a national lecture tour. And so he was very expansive. He started these tours, several of them, back and forth across America. And he called them the practice of joy. And he took many people with him, singers and people to greet other people. And so in our own lives, when we face obstacles spiritually or practically, don't contract. Don't say, oh, I must be a bad person that this happened. Just put out more energy. That's what Swamiji did. And in those lecture tours, he drew many new wonderful devotees who moved to Ananda and helped us rebuild. And it was such a wonderful example of how to face adversity. And again, in our spiritual life, if we get discouraged, if we feel like, oh, I'm not a good devotee or I can't meditate, just put out more energy. Just say, a friend of ours said once, who was having a difficult time spiritually, he said, you know, if all of Yoganandaji's disciples are like runners in a race, he said, maybe I'm at the very, very back of the pack, but I'm still running. And so just don't stop. Put out more energy and put out joyful energy. That's what God likes. He likes the devotee. Master was a spiritual warrior, and he used the expression, I am bloodied but unbowed. And so we have to be that way to really pursue the spiritual path in our lifetime, because we will be tested, and our karma will try, our bad karma, which we all have until we're freed from it, it will try to block us, and we'll try to think, oh, why bother? And so I don't want to get up early to meditate. I've been working so hard. But we all have those tests. But if we can just keep expanding and joyfully saying, this will not deter me. I know what I want, that single-pointed focus. And then finally, a lesson from Swamiji's life that we all can apply to our spiritual life to keep growing is, as Jyotish was referring, great generosity of spirit. Swamiji, after all, spent 3.5 years, the last years of Yoganandaji's life, in the ashram of a great avatar, and was personally trained by him and personally groomed to really spread this mission in a global way. And then all of us young college students, we came to him. We knew nothing. We were serious and interested, but we really knew very little about the science of yoga, meditation, all that. But he didn't say, oh gosh, look what a bunch of dodos I have. He just made us feel good that we could practice yoga, that we could find God. He gave many of us in those early years spiritual names. And one day he just walked up to me and he said, I'm going to give you the name Devi, and it means Divine Mother, and you'd better live up to it. But in those words, he also gave me the energy to do it. And he would walk into a room and he would say, good morning, all you great souls. And he meant it, and because he meant it, we believed it. And so many stories of that generosity of sharing the teachings with Yogananda. We were sharing with some of you once we were helping Swamiji give a talk in Paris, and the people who were promoting it were, they didn't do a good job. There was no beautiful flyers or posters or ads like we've done here. And so Swami came to give the lecture, and he had just flown in from the United States, and he had a bad flu. He wasn't well. And we were trying to say, oh, Swami, don't, make it a short talk. He had a fever. He said, no, no, no. And so we waited and waited in this big hall. No one came. No one. Finally, one man walked in. And we said, Swamiji, you go back to your room, please, and rest. We'll talk to this man. He said, no. He said, he came to hear me tell about my guru, and I will do this. So he sat in the front row with this man, one man, and he talked with him for about an hour, sharing how he met Yoganandaji, how the lessons he learned. And we never saw that man again. But Swamiji did, that generosity of spirit that wanted to give and give. And so in our spiritual life too, it's important to share your joy, your devotion with other people. I've seen many examples of different kinds of devotees over the years. There was one man who, at the early days of Ananda, who has rather an arrogant, proud man, and he would meditate every day for 5 hours or something, but he was so cold and so condescending to other people, and he finally left Ananda. But the people who followed Swami's example and meditated, kept their life focused, but then shared that kindness and that generosity of spirit with others, those were the people who over the years have really grown spiritually. So this was Swamiji's way, this was Master's way, to share with others in the most expansive way we can. And so, there's a line at the end of one of the books in the Christian Bible, the Gospel of St. John, where he said, if all the stories of our Master were gathered, that they would fill many, many books. And so it is with Swamiji. If those of us whose lives he touched, we could talk for many, many days, many weeks about those. But the important thing is not just to think, well, he did this, but to think, how can I draw from his example to deepen and expand my own search for God? So these are things in our lives that we have drawn on and that we cherish in our hearts with great joy and great love. And we are happy and blessed to share them with all of you. God bless you.
So, what now? Sure. We don't want to hold people, but if they're wanting to ask. He whispered, do you want to take any questions? And so we'd be happy to answer some questions if anyone has any. We don't want to hold you. I know that you've had a long day already and you still have a commute to get home, but if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them or try to. Okay.
We often say dharmic living, dharmic living, dharmic living.
3 times?
I don't mean that. Too often it is told to us. So, could we have in a nutshell what exactly is dharmic living?
Okay, I'll repeat this because it's being recorded. Can we have in a nutshell what is dharmic living? Well, in this sense, we're using the word dharma as alignment with righteousness. One of the, one could say, slogans of Ananda is Yato Dharma Tata Jaya. Where there is dharma, or adherence to right action, adherence to righteousness, there is victory. So dharma in this sense means holding your will in alignment with righteousness. Now everybody can understand that concept, but then they begin to change the way that they define righteousness. Some people will define righteousness by the thought that if others don't believe the way I do, they have to be eliminated from this earth. So I'll plant a bomb. What could be more righteous than that? So how do we begin to discern true righteousness from what we think? A very good place to start is with the yamas and niyamas of Patanjali, because these great avatars come in to this world and they give us not just broad general teachings, but they give us specific things. So in the Bible there are the 10 Commandments, and in Patanjali it's very like the 10 Commandments. There are the 5 yamas and the 5 niyamas. And so the yamas of Patanjali are non-violence, non-lying, non-stealing, non-sensuality, and non-greed. And so, but Patanjali in his Yoga Sutras also says that if we're practicing the yamas or the niyamas, they have to be practiced without regard to time or place. So we can't only practice them when it's convenient. So we can't say, oh, I practice nonviolence, but if someone gets in front of me in the line, I'm going to push him out of the way and be angry with him. We have to do it everywhere as much as possible. So we can take those as guidelines of what is righteous, and that eliminates the bomber from the righteous people because he's practicing violence. Or it means that if we're in business, we have to be honest in business, because the second yama is non-lying. It also means that we can't steal. And these things on the surface are usually relatively easy to practice. But nonviolence, for instance, to talk about that a little bit, it isn't just that you can't go and slap people or hit them or do something that is physically violent. It also means that you can't say something about a person that hurts them, because that's doing violence. And if you can accomplish that so that you're not gossiping, you're not saying negative things, then you have to go to the next level and not think in terms of people. So these things are not either or, but they're directional. And so righteousness is directional. And we will understand gradually, according to what we practice, what is more and more righteous. Because if we begin to do a serious practice, in this case we're talking about nonviolence, do a serious practice, our inner self, our own conscience will guide us, and we will become very hurt ourselves if we hurt anything. I remember one time when I was driving, and this was a few years ago, and in order to get to our community, there's a windy road, and I was driving at night, and as I came around a bend, there was a bird, a little owl about that big, in the road, and I didn't have any way to stop and any way to avoid hitting him, and I hit the little owl and I killed him. I felt so bad. I mean, I didn't do there a violent act consciously or purposely, but I felt so bad. I was feeling the poor little owl, and I was praying for its soul, and here it is probably 15 years later, and I still remember a little trauma of hitting that owl. So your own conscience will become the guide for you, and it'll guide you more and more subtly. So what does it mean, Dharma? To try to live a righteous life, to try to live that more consciously, more continuously, and if you do that to the best of your understanding, then your understanding will increase, and your ability to do that will become subtler and subtler until you will become perfected in that practice. And when you're perfected in it, you can't do violence. And you even gain a power or a siddhi, which Patanjali says for the person perfected in nonviolence, the whole world around him becomes nonviolent. So there's a story of Master going out into the jungle with some young boys, and they had to stop overnight, and the driver of the bullock cart had forgotten to close the doors of a little stall, and a Bengal tiger came and was about to go after the cows. Master went out alone into the night with just a little lantern, and even that, the wind blew that out. So he was just out in the moonlight, standing between the cows and the tiger. But he looked at the tiger with so much love that it came up and it rolled at his feet, and he scratched its belly a little bit and petted it, and then it got up and walked away into the jungle. So when we become perfected, the whole world becomes nonviolent around us. But what is Dharma? It's to do what we ourselves can perceive as being the righteous thing to do, and do it to the best of our ability. Devi's turn.
You can hold that. So I just add a simple thought. Dharma is different for each one of us in a certain sense. You know, it says in the Gita, better to fail at your own Dharma than to succeed at someone else's. So Dharmic living is also looking at exactly what is ours to do. If a mother has a young child and says, oh, I don't want to take care of that baby, it's always crying and it's so much work, and I think I'll go back to my profession and let someone else, that isn't doing her Dharma. And for another person who might need to earn money to support the family, didn't have children, going and getting a good job would be the right Dharma. So it's looking at exactly what's in front of you, doing it to the best that you can, and then giving the fruits of our actions to God. That's the most important thing. Not to say, this is mine. So many of us, we look at our children and we think, I have to live through the success of my children. Our children aren't ours. Our jobs aren't ours. Our belongings aren't ours. It's all God's. But if we can just say, I will do, I believe it was Paramahansa Ramakrishna said, we should live in this world like a maidservant in the wealthy man's home. We go and we do our job, we clean the house, we care for the children, whatever it may be, but then at the end of the day we go back to our home. This is a metaphor for how we live in the world. We do our duty, but then at the end of the day we go back to our home in God. And that's a good way to help us do our dharma.
In Swami Kriyananda mentioned about super consciousness, he said the awareness comes first and then the thought, but we think the thought comes first and then the awareness. I would like you to.
In super consciousness, but even in our normal conscious life, we think that we think first, and then the thought produces the action and so on. But even in studies of the brain, they can see that we react and then we begin a thought process. So they can see movement in the neurons or movement in the cells and the nerves, sometimes in the heart or sometimes elsewhere, before we have a conscious thought. And so there's consciousness always, and that consciousness, it's almost as if it coalesces into a thinking process. And so Swamiji, one of the ways that he taught us also was, in meditation, try not to allow the mind to get into rational thinking. Try to be very focused and have the consciousness open to intuition or to superconsciousness, because intuition will come before the thinking process comes into play. And often there are things in our life that God brings lessons to us that we don't understand why those lessons came. We can think about it, but thinking is, in many cases, not a very good tool to understanding. One time Swamiji was giving me some correction about a behavior pattern that I had, the way that I worked with people. And he told me, and I said, "I understand, Swamiji." And I said it with humility. And he said, "I don't care whether you understand or not. I want you to change." And so sometimes understanding, sometimes thinking can become a barrier to a higher consciousness that allows us to change. And so super consciousness comes, Master taught that our soul's natural way of perceiving is through intuition. We don't have to think about, if this happens, therefore that must have happened, therefore this, and here's the conclusion. That's like a chess player, which is, I think there's a world championship going on in Bangalore right now. And so Anand and Carlson. Oh, here. That's right, in Chennai. We were at the hotel where that's being held. So we don't have to be like Anand or Carlson and think through 7 moves ahead. The real game is played with God through intuition. But then we don't always have that open to us. So then we have to use the best tools that we have. If you're a carpenter and you don't have a hammer to pound a nail, then pick up a rock and pound the nail. So if we have a problem to solve and it isn't open, our intuition isn't open yet, then pick up a thought and pound the nail, pound the problem with our thinking. We just have to do what we can. But gradually, as we open up and still the mind, and more importantly, still the emotions, the likes and dislikes, then superconsciousness and intuition blossoms and the answers come more directly. Devi says no.
Nothing more to say.
Okay.